What's up, ladies, gentlemen, everything in between and on the outskirts. Welcome to kae4s1 Anime, where I'll attempt to give my thoughts in a reviewer's type of manner on anime that either I've been watching or recommended by people for me to take a look at. Today we're going to be looking at Tekken Bloodlines, which is a 6-episode series released on August of 2022 through Bandai Namco, with Studio Habari and Lars Entertainment being at the helm for the animation. I really have to give note to Lars Entertainment because they were the ones behind kae4s1, which is a series that I didn't expect to like it as much as I did. I mean, given my stance on CGI. You see, some anime does it better than others, but for a particular example, check out the review that I did for Land of the Illustrious. kae4s1 to me reminded me of Baki the Grappler with his own unique identity. I really recommend you checking this anime out. But anyway, Tekken Bloodlines is an anime adaptation of the popular fighting game franchise created by Seiichi Ishii in 1994. This was during the time period where the concept of video games being in 3D was beginning to be introduced into the world as a possibility, because since then, most fighting games was two-dimensional. Ever since Tekken's beginning stages throughout the years, Tekken has evolved into this massive beast that we see today. Story-wise, graphic-wise, mechanics, technicalities, designs, you name it. With every iteration and sequel, you just see this game mutates even further. Today, the biggest fighting game tournament known throughout the world as EVO has the Tekken franchise as one of its attractions in regards to people around the world coming to compete against each other. So now we have Tekken Bloodlines, whose story is centered around the events of the game franchise, specifically set between the events of Tekken 2 and the end of Tekken 3 with minor little changes here and there. So the plot follows Jin Kazama, a young kid who was trained in martial arts by his mother Jun Kazama, who is quite the formidable fighter but notably keeps Jin in the dark in regards to some of the rather important things about his lineage. If you played the Tekken games for the most part, you know what this leads to. So one day, a creature by the name of Ogre decides to pay the Kazamas a visit, and things don't go too well. This leads to Jin seeking out his family, which, as a minor spoiler, has the tradition of being fathers of the year. Well, their relative he meets is his grandfather, who trains him to get revenge on the very thing that attacked him and his mom. And for the most part, that's the plot. But if you've been following the Tekken games for years and know the lore, you already know this. And because of that fact, this series can prove to be rather disappointing at times. But where this small season shine is within its way to explore and convey what happened during Jin's years up under his grandfather's tutelage. Seeing Jin wrestle with two conflicting ideologies personified in not only his mental state but fighting styles adds a level of depth not shown within the game franchise. And it's here for the people who are already familiar with this character as being the sleazebag, you will now discover how much of a sleazebag he truly is. Baked within the narrative, certain events are brought up that harken back to the events before the time of Jin's conception, a lot of which foreshadow certain things if this anime should ever have a follow-up season. But while we're on relationships, seeing and hearing some of these fighters interact with each other stays true to the source material. It's safe to say that a lot of these characters aren't friends, a lot of them are rivals, and others are pretty much bitter enemies to the end. But one thing I can say about Tekken Bloodlines, and I can also say about the Tekken franchise, is that each fighter has their own purpose and reason for entering this tournament. And with that, I have to say this is a nice adaptation of a story that's already set. Now let's talk about the visuals. Bloodline looks different with this animation style. It's a nice blend between 2D, 3D, seemingly hand-drawn, and then sometimes cel-shaded presentation. But throughout all these different aesthetics, it still maintains the spirit of the game and the identity of the original source material. It's also kinda hard not to notice just how beefed up some of these characters appear. But for the most part, each character stays true to their iconic fighters they're based off of course with a couple of tweaks here and there. As I was watching, I noticed some of the moves that comes from the games being featured. And as a fan of Tekken, I was looking forward to seeing my boy King. He in particular is unique when it comes to his grab moves within the Tekken franchise. But to the unfamiliar, here's how it looks within the game. Seeing this and then witnessing who his opponent was kinda made me feel bad because it was basically child abuse against a schoolgirl. Now I do remember one person getting injured in this series and it was kinda believable, but compared to King's opponent, that fighter should have been close to death. When a person gets hit, the impact upon contact is heard and damn near felt by the viewer. As far as the animation goes, it does a good job at this, because within the Tekken games, a simple jab combo would just look like a simple tap until the end, while here it shows more weight and exhibits how deadly and ruthless certain techniques are.
Worthy of your ancestry, even if it killed.
This could not have been made believable without the awesome sound design. so kudos to that. And personally, I cannot tell one time when the soft blow was shown in the fight. One of the things I really appreciated was the inclusion of that electricity and other effects that appear when certain techniques are performed. This is also seen within the fighting games, and I really don't understand the meaning behind it, so I would assume that it's just the fighter's chi or something like that. But how Bloodlines makes it seem, it will be believed to be the inner demon gene waking up, and I'm not going to be going too far into that, seeing as there'll be ultimate spoilers. Lastly, I want to talk about how those dynamic camera angles kick in. Most matches, if not all, has more flair added to their fights due to the camera focus behaving like it's attached to a drone and sent flying around the two combatants. This not only makes the scenes look more epic, but it really gives you a view of how the fighters perform their moves. If with the proper power, of course, it could be performed in real life. Now let's talk about the voice actors that bring these characters to life. I watched the English version, so the people I will be talking about are obviously the English voice actors. And there are plenty of them, but I'll just be talking about the three main characters who carry this show. So let's start with the main protagonist, yukhazara, who is voiced by kae4s1. This dude's resume is huge considering all the projects he lended his voice in, whether it's from anime to video games. Some of the standouts to me when it comes to his anime roles were Satoru Gojo from Jujutsu Kaisen 0, Hidrason from 7 Deadly Sins, Joe from Megalobox, Osamu from Bugo Stray Dogs, Vegeta from Dragon Ball Super, and lastly, Guts from Berserk of 2016. Here within Bloodlines, Koji brings out the stoic and loner personality of Jin. The voice actor for yukhazara was done by Vivian Liu, who has done voice dubbing for other anime, video games, and even live-action series like Squid Game. Here is yukhazara. She embodies the motherly, nurturing nature of a character while at the same time possessing a tone of clarity, decisiveness, being firm and direct. And the third and last voice actor I want to talk about is Hiroshi Watanabe, who voices the devious and intimidating Heihachi Mishima. Within Bloodlines, he does this character justice. Heihachi has always been a man strong in his convictions and beliefs, although rooted in a need for more power and greed. His portrayal within Bloodlines is convincing and cannot be more of an accurate representation of him. The music of Tekken Bloodlines was done by Ray Kondo, who's done works for other gaming titles such as Dragon's Dogma, Bayonetta, Onimusha Warlords, Okami, Mario Party 10, and the list goes on. Bloodlines OST can easily fit in with the other Tekken game soundtracks, which in my opinion has one of the best catalogs of gaming music. Not only are the tunes addicting and varied within their styles, but as the listener listens to each project, it becomes undeniable that it showcased growth coinciding with each Tekken title, its story, and the layers of complexity. So expect to hear a whole lot of strong, intense electronic synths along with some relaxing and serene tracks. I will link to where you can listen to the game's OST in the description below. Now let's talk about some of the criticisms that I have. This series definitely took some creative liberties with incorporating characters that was never introduced until way later in the franchise. Case in point will be this fighter by the name of
Leroy Smith.
As I said before, this series takes place between Tekken 2 and Tekken 3 games, and the only Leroys that I ever knew during the time I was playing these games was, one, their brother that got the glow, Bruce Leroy, and later on, of course, in 2005, the infamous
Oh my god, he just ran in.
Really, this fighter was not created until Tekken 7, so I guess the only reason why he's even in this series is probably due to fan service, or for just simply narrative-driven purposes. The second criticism that I have is that I will say at least 1/4, if not half of every episode are reused clips of things that the viewer already saw in previous episodes. This sometimes gave me the impression of just inflating the runtime of each episode, in which case only annoyed me. This is one of the tendencies that I strongly dislike. The primary suspect where this distaste began for me was during the Dragon Ball Z run. The long recaps and minutes of just standing around looking at each other never ceased to enrage me due to the fact that I was aware of the length of each episode with commercial breaks on top of that.
Which one is the button to make?
Next time on Dragon Ball Z, 9 minutes of Vegeta fuming, 11 minutes of Goku fretting, plus somebody throws a punch. To find out who, tune in next week to Dragon Ball Z!
But enough of my Dragon Ball Z rant. The third criticism that I have is that somewhere within my wishful mind, I was expecting some questions to be answered, like what really happened to John? We get an interpretation in Bloodlines, but the more I think about it, my questions go unanswered. At the end of the day, I'm still left with some speculation as to what ultimately became of her, and can only try to make my conclusion through miscellaneous characters of the Tekken games who share similarities to her likeness. The second thing I wish to see was just how exactly Kazi and Jun even got together. Like really, how did that work? The relationship between these two is one of the top 3 relationships I feel that came out of nowhere, with the first two being who actually got busy with Palpatine, and the first time we found out that Vegeta and Bulma was going to be an item. When it comes to writing out plot lines, it would be more understandable if there were hints of it being foreshadowed or seeds of it gradually growing over time. But instead, out of all of these examples, we just hit over the head and forced to accept it. And the last criticism that I have is this one simple question: why is there a triangle shadow overlay on everybody? I mean, it really just makes no sense. But anyway, it's time to wrap up this review. Tekken Bloodlines overall is alright. It's somewhat refreshing to see some of the things fleshed out, but again, if you already know the story from the games, you won't necessarily be missing out on anything crucial. During the time of this review, the show was seemingly exclusive to Netflix. Honestly, I hope that there's a second and more better season, because there were some characters that was getting hyped, although we barely saw them here. And oh yeah, I can't wait for Tekken 8. That trailer though. Yeah, it's awesome. Peace.